Good evening. I would like to call the Prince William County School Board meeting to order. One sort of comment to make is this meeting is being broadcast with live closed captioning on PWCS.TV.com. Click to watch live with captions on the top right of the screen. At this point, we're going to go into closed session. We're going to take a vote to go into closed session just to tell everyone how tonight's going to work for about 2 hours, possibly a little longer, possibly a little shorter, but approximately 2 hours, with the intention to do a budget work session when we come back out, which will be public and live and certainly closed captioned. Again, you can see that on live closed captioning on PWCSTV.com. And so at this point, a motion is in order. Ms. Williams?
Mr. Chairman, the purpose of the meeting.
Oh.
Yeah, you have to read the.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I have to read the purpose of the meeting. Thank you, Ms. McGowan. Thank you. This closed session of the Prince William County School Board is being conducted electronically under the authority granted by the General Assembly on April 22nd, 2020, through Amendment 28 to House Bill 29, which permits the school board to meet electronically during the pendency of the current state of emergency for the purpose of transacting such business as it is statutory required or necessary to continue operations of the Prince William County Public Schools and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. Next, I need a motion to have the approval for the closed session agenda. Ms. Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the Prince William County School Board approve the closed session agenda as recommended.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. Ms. Ralston seconds. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor. Let's do the, wow, let me get my list out here for the roll call. All right, I didn't have it memorized here. We'll go with, let me go with who's on the screen here. Ms. Jackson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Wall, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Dargapur, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Williams, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Wilk, how do you vote?
Regarding
approval of the closed session agenda?
yes.
Okay, Ms. Jessie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ralston, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, that is unanimous. Next, we'll go to the next motion is moving the motion to enter closed session. The motion's in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm move that the pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711, the Prince William County School Board enter closed session to consult with legal counsel regarding legal matters involving threatening litigation, specific personnel and students, which require the advice of counsel under Virginia Code 2.2-3711 A 1, 2, 4, 7, and 8.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Ralston seconds. Okay, any discussion? Okay, we'll go through the vote again. On the last vote, by the way, I did vote yes. I forgot to call myself. So we'll go through it. I'll call myself. This time Lateef votes yes to go into closed session. Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Wall?
Yes.
Ms. Zargapur?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Wilk?
Yes.
Ms. Jessie?
Yes.
Ms. Ralston?
Yes.
Let it note that all board members voted yes by voice vote there, and that was unanimous to enter closed session. All the board members have their instructions to enter closed session. You can sign off here. And then, as I said, for the public, we should hopefully be back in a couple hours. Thank you. The Prince William County School Board is now returning to open session from closed session. We have a closed session action item, and I would like a motion for that closed session action item. Ms. Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the Prince William County School Board retain the law firm of Huntington Andrews Kurth to provide legal services for specific matters as directed by the board and to authorize the chairman to execute a retainer agreement.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, as seeing no discussion, I will take a roll call vote in alphabetical order or close to it. Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson votes yes. Ms. Jessie?
Yes.
Ms. Jessie votes yes. Dr. Lateef, I vote yes. Ms. Ralston?
Yes.
Ms. Ralston votes yes. Ms. Wall?
Yes.
Ms. Wall votes yes. Mr. Wilk?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Wilk votes yes. Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Williams votes yes. Ms. Zargarpur?
Yes.
Ms. Zargarpur votes yes. That motion passes unanimously. Next, we'll be moving on to the closed session certification. A motion is in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3712, the closed session of the Prince William County School Board meeting of May 13, 2020, be certified by adopting the following resolution. Now, therefore, be resolved that the Prince William County School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification resolution applies. And 2, only such public business matters that were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard and or discussed or considered by the school board.
Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Ms. Ralston seconds. Any discussion? As seeing no discussion, I'll take the roll call vote once again. Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson votes yes. Ms. Jessie?
Yes.
Ms. Jessie votes yes. Dr. Lateef, I vote yes. Ms. Ralston?
Yes.
Ms. Ralston votes yes. Ms. Wall?
Yes.
Ms. Wall votes yes. Mr. Wilk?
Yes.
Mr. Wilk votes yes. Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Williams votes yes. Ms. Zargarpur?
Yes.
Ms. Zargarpur votes yes. Next, we'll move on to the open meeting work session. I would like to call the work session of the Prince William County School Board to order. This work session of the Prince William County School Board is being conducted electronically to address issues related to the COVID-19 crisis as permitted by Section 2.23708.2A3 of the Virginia's Freedom of Information Act and pursuant to the authority provided to the public bodies by the General Assembly on April 22nd, 2020 through Amendment 28 to House Bill 29. The recent legislation also permits the school board to meet electronically during the pendency of the current state of emergency for the purpose of transacting such business as it is statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the Prince William County Public Schools and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. Accordingly, the agenda for this work session is confined to budget issues resulting from the COVID-19 emergency as it affects Prince William County schools and or adoption of a budget as required by Virginia Code 22.192 and necessary to the continued operations of the school division. Next, we'll move to 8.01, Superintendent's recommended modifications of the fiscal year budget information. At this point, are we having a presentation, Dr. Waltz? An update?
A couple of brief remarks from myself and then Mr. Wallingford.
Wonderful, thank you.
Continue.
I'll remind everyone who will not be speaking to go ahead and mute, and Dr. Waltz and I guess Mr. Wallingford will put together the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Lateef and members of the board. Of course, let me just first say that my heart goes out to everyone who has been affected by the COVID pandemic. And I certainly recognize that we've had losses of life here in Prince William County and a difficult strain on everybody for a variety of reasons. So I just want to say that certainly all of our students, staff, parents, and community are in our hearts and minds, and we will just continue to work to get through this difficult time. So the school budget is such a huge part of our everyday work, and I'm so pleased that our school board passed a phenomenal budget with a unanimous vote. And we were so excited about that. And then the pandemic affected everything. So we know that we're going to have very substantial revenue losses. It could be as much as $60 million. Therefore, I presented last week proposed adjustments to the budget for the school board's consideration. And I just wanted to make 4 comments about that. So one of the board's highest priorities was the economically disadvantaged funds. And we are still increasing those funds for next year, albeit not as much. But there is something else that is happening. We reallocated over $5 million for the purchase of computers. And we are making sure that students who don't have a computer or can't afford a computer are provided one. And we have had several thousand already distributed. So if you consider the changes that will be made with technology, the economically disadvantaged students will actually receive more funding than if we hadn't cut anything. So if you will include those technology costs, your intent, I believe, is still well served. The second thing I'd like to discuss is our phenomenal staff. We couldn't operate, and I just can't say enough about the Herculean efforts of our staff through the COVID pandemic, and instruction still continues each and every day with our phenomenal teaching faculty, and so much support is being given by faculty and staff doing a variety of jobs. So I'm very pleased to say that we were able to do a cost of living increase of approximately 2.8%. I'm sorry, let me retract that. A step increase of approximately 2.8%. And this is at a time when 2 of our neighbors who we're often compared to are freezing their salaries. We were also able to make these budget adjustments without laying off any employees. So we're very pleased about that. And finally, the budget cuts that we are making do not reduce the building budgets from the 1920 school year. So with that, as difficult as they are, I think those are 4 points to keep in mind as you deliberate. And then there are just a few items that Mr. Wallingford wanted to cover, and then we'll turn it back to you, Chairman Lateef.
Thank you. Mr. Wallingford.
Dr. Wells, thank you. Dr. Lateef and members of the board, just 1 or 2 real brief comments. Jason has just put a slide up on the screen. We have a modest revenue adjustment that I wanted to share with you. Our state revenue, you can see the numbers on the top right-hand corner of that slide. We've actually made some adjustments to state revenue after re-examining the numbers. And you can see that we've reduced state revenue further, $580,000. Jason, thank you. The next thing the next point I'd like to make is one of the reductions that we shared with you last week is a position that is actually filled with staff. And so when I shared these possible cuts with Dr. Waltz, I inadvertently shared with him one that's filled. It's number 9. You can see that if you have your a list of cuts that we shared with you yesterday. That's the student services counselor coordinator, 1 FTE. And so we're removing that as one of the items to be cut from the budget. Thank you.
Okay, is that all then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, so what we'll do is very similar to what we do in the normal budget work session. We'll go around the room, and I know many of you had the opportunity to review the budget over the last week and have discussions with Dr. Waltz and John Wallingford and with staff possibly. So we'll go through and look at some adjustments to this budget and hear what the members have to say. We'll go in order again. We'll start with Ms. Jackson.
I just want to thank the staff for answering our questions and for the amended proposed budget executive summary. I just have some questions, and I'm sure I will generate more questions as the discussion increases. But referring to, I'm looking at on the line items. Is item numbers 16 and 17 on the new executive summary. And then I look on page 5 of the PowerPoint. And maybe I'm reading it wrong, but it seems to be two different pieces of information, because it looks like on page 5 of the PowerPoint we were provided, it looks like that there's deferrals for the turf fields, but on the paper, am I reading it wrong? It looks like it's still included.
Mr. Wallingford or Dr. Waltz?
So Dr. Latif, I'm pulling up the presentation. I don't have that paper in front of me. Ms. Jackson, which slide is it you're referring to again?
Page 5 of the PowerPoint versus the adjusted markup that we requested. And then on that, it would be line items 16 and 17.
And so excuse me, I'm sorry. Your question is what?
My question is, there is nothing listed as deferred on the new paper versus on the PowerPoint, it appears to be deferred. Am I reading it wrong, or is it just a misprint? Or
You may be reading it correctly. The suggestions that Dr. Waltz made at last week's meeting are all listed correctly on the executive summary, the long sheet that you referred to. Slide number 5 were additional deferrals that Dr. Waltz is suggesting the board consider this evening.
so they're not included on these, like they're just additional ones that we could include later?
That is correct.
Okay, and then just for final question, and again, I might have more later, is all of the information, the questions, the executive summary, the markup, all of that is posted for the public to see and review?
It has not been yet, but it will be after the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we'll go to Ms. Jessie.
Okay, I had some recommendations, and there are really more questions than there are recommendations. I know that we have a technology plan in place, but I'm just looking at down the road what's going to happen, and I'm wondering if there's some way we can look at number of T-spec for schools to make sure that we have the support we need. I don't think we know what's going to happen in these schools, but it seems like this whole distant learning is something that we really need to pay attention to. And I don't know, and I'm not making a specific recommendation. I just think that it's more than just a deferment. I think we really need to relook at the emphasis, because today I was noticing that some of the universities, I think in California, are not going to open at all in the fall. I don't think we know what's going to happen in the fall. And so I'm wondering if we should get ahead and really look at our technology, distant learning, and support for teachers. Some of the teachers are telling me that they need support for their computer technology at home. So is that something that we could relook at, or at least make it a fluid type of a consideration?
Yes.
Dr. Waltz, can you address that and what steps you're taking currently to do professional development, and what you've put in the budget for next year regarding teachers' use of computers?
I'll have Mr. Guilfoy respond, please. Associate Superintendent for Communications and Technology.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things that you're talking about there. One is T-specs. So those are technical support specialists. And then the other are instructional technology coaches, or ITCs. So typically a T-spec is somebody who is really dealing with the hardware.
Mhm.
And then the ITC, the instructional technology coach, is somebody who's dealing and helping with teachers to learn instruction. So when it comes to the T-specs, we currently have 62. We have one at every high school and one at just about every middle school. And then at the elementary level, they're shared between two schools. I think certainly, having additional T-specs would be something I would welcome. I don't know that that's realistic in the current time frame, but I think down the road it's something certainly we could look at. With regard to the professional development piece, there's a number of things that are going on. Primarily, a lot of that's being led by student learning, but in concert with our instructional technology coaches. As you all know, Dr. Waltz mentioned last week that we are working to standardize the school division on Canvas, the learning management system. So we have been putting a lot of emphasis right now on getting teachers at least familiar with that tool. And then over the summer, student learning has a robust plan in place to begin to really dive into more of how they use that more effectively for teaching and the modules that are involved. So there is ongoing professional development right now. I know that many schools have their instructional technology coaches are hard at work. They're doing Zoom meetings every day with their teachers, helping them learn how to use Canvas, the basics of it, and how to do effective teaching as much as we can in this virtual setting as rapidly as possible. I think, for a lot of teachers, even if you've been a teacher for a long time, now all of a sudden you're essentially a brand new teacher because you have to learn all new things. So we are hard at work on those things.
Well, I think if you could really be fluid in your thinking on that. And I put something in that I don't know if it's possible. As we look at this whole virus situation, I think that we need to look at additional nursing staff down the road. I don't know if it's something we could consider. And I just put an oversight person because I don't think we know what's going to happen in these schools with these children. And now that we're looking at situation with students, and I'm wondering if down the road we could look at an additional nurse at the high one, at the middle, and two at elementary to support schools during this. And I just think that when we wrote this budget, we did not have the situation that we have now. And I think that we need to be fluid and think differently. And I'm not sure you may not need some more trained nurses on staff. And I'd like for you guys just to consider that.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Waltz.
Noted.
Okay, great. And I think to your point, Ms. Jessie, I know that Ms. Wall and I attended the nursing, the meeting on school health committee, and they were all over the pandemic much earlier than and a lot of folks have said, and our nursing staff is outstanding, Ms. Polk and Ms. Bellamy. And I think that once they let us know how things are moving forward, I think you're correct that we should be fluid in our thinking. And I think as the Board of County Supervisors, Chair Wheeler mentioned that they're going to be looking at their budgets every quarter. And I think we should have the idea that we'll have an open mind to make adjustments on the fly. And I suspect Dr. Waltz understands that as well as the entire staff, that we are in a fluid situation and monies may get shifted to the needs. I think that's fair.
And finally, I think that teachers are essential workers, and I think we need to think of them in that way. I'm not sure we can give them the COLA that they want, but I think they should be a priority. And I know that some of you have asked for additional people at central office. I just think that that would be a mistake for us. I think that actually, I think teachers deserve more pay because they are essential. And I heard someone say, well, we'll just move the kids apart, or we'll just have the teachers stay in the room at lunch. I don't know how you can keep a third grader from getting close to another third grader. But I think that we also, with this, need to think about our teachers in a different way. And I know I'm not recommending an amount of money, but I do think that the number one priority has to be teachers. And I have some others, but I'm gonna move on, let someone else speak.
Ms. Ralston,
Nothing at this moment.
Ms. Wall? Ms. Wall, you're muted.
Sorry about that. My thoughts on the budget are, I actually have a question, but I'll make my comment first and then I'll ask my question. But state revenue sources are not reliable right now, highly volatile and very unpredictable as our local sources of revenue. And so my greatest concern right now is that we could end up with an even greater shortfall than we have got now. And I think the worst thing that I could think would happen would be for us to kind of overplay our hand and put money towards things that later we have to retract from and pull back from, and worst case scenario would be let people go. So something that I'm really concerned about is how conservative we are with this budget at this time. I think this is a time where we need to be really careful and prepare for what could be a long, drawn-out fight with COVID-19. So that being said, I guess are we asking questions right now, or are we just making comments?
No, you can ask your questions now. I
Okay,
think we
so
should
my
try to be as
question,
efficient as possible.
yeah, my question right now is, I have two questions. One is, I saw the slide, and it looks like the state revenue forecast has been reduced even more, but not a huge amount. But state revenue sources and local revenue sources, I guess how often are we going to be taking in that information and adjusting accordingly? That would probably be my first question is, what's our process in place for evaluating in real time how much money we have coming in as this kind of develops over the summer?
Great question. Dr. Waltz?
I'll defer to Mr. Wallingford. He knows a little bit more about when those revenues come in quarterly and that sort of thing. So, Mr. Wallingford, please.
Thank you, Dr. Waltz. Currently, I'm looking at revenues, some revenues on a week-to-week basis, and some revenues you only see on a monthly basis. For example, sales tax revenues. I've actually gotten together with some of the folks over at the county, and we're examining that data as frequently as it comes in. So at the point at which the General Assembly reconvenes and addresses the issue of what those two sources will be, sales tax and lottery funding, once we know that, we'll come back and adjust. If we see a precipitous fall off in the next month, then obviously that's something that I'd share with Dr. Waltz and we would come back and share with the board. If I could, it's an opportunity for me to slip in a comment. I agree with your comment, Mrs. Wall. I think we need to be conservative and really consider what we do. Ms. Jackson, the deferrals that you referred to, those cash-based projects that Dr. Waltz shared with you last week, I think that really should be taken seriously and considered. Thank you.
Anything further, Ms. Wall?
No, thank you. That's all.
Mr. Wilk? You can unmute.
Thank you. I know you like hearing my voice, Dr. Lateef. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Waltz, Mr. Wallingford, your team for readjusting the budget given the economic situation today. No surprise, my highest priority right now, if I was to list, is to try to somehow keep the COLA or at least partial COLA. I want to resonate everything what Ms. Jessie said about the valuable resource of our staff. Our economy is in free fall and the cost of daily expenses are bound to go up. That's exactly why we have a cost of living increase. So I think by us making the efforts to support this or some type of partial component of it, we are helping directly impact the mental health, the quality of the lives of our teachers and our workforce moving forward. So I have ideas. I mean, I guess we could come together as a board and ask for a recommendation of how we could find some funding for that. All the cuts, most of the cuts that are being made come from the new expenditures. There are existing budgetary expenditures that I think we could look at for additional room, especially given the reality, as Ms. Jessie already alluded to, that many districts are now all over this country starting to talk about beginning the fall in a virtual environment. With that being said, knowing that, is there room for cutting costs with textbooks? Is there room for cutting costs and new furniture or replacement stuff like that? Those are areas where I think we potentially could see opportunities to fill that gap and lead to more of that COLA for our staff to move forward instead of, we could see this as an opportunity for us to catch up in a sense. While the other counties are stalling on this, we can move forward and try to get back to where I've always wanted us to be from the previous recession and try to keep that moving forward with our team. I have some other areas where I'd like to still see possibility, like the pay increase for our subs and TAs. I calculate that to be an additional $145,000 that we could try to pull in, whether, again, it's by cutting some existing costs in the budget forecast for next year, and then also look at pay increase for our bus drivers. That would be another focus to try to keep, again, support and morale high for bus drivers, a very difficult position, an area that we also often find times have trouble hiring. So those would be three priorities, trying to still work that in, obviously with majority support of the board. I still have nightmares of how bad the last budget work session worked out for me, but still happy to at least try or move forward with these proposals. So thank you.
So what I recommend is we'll hear from everyone, and then we'll come back around to try to sort of come up with some proposals moving forward. Is that okay, Mr. Wilk?
Oh yeah, no, I was just speaking. Yeah, thank you.
Anything further you'd like to add?
I'm good, sir. Thanks.
Excellent. Ms. Williams?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Wilk. Always a joy to follow you with the teacher raises because, so I think that we are, I would echo Ms. Wall's comment. I think it's better to be safe than sorry. I don't agree with the theory, and I'm sure this will make me hugely unpopular, but the math backs it up. I'm recommending that we add staff at the Kelly building, specifically an attorney, because I think Carol, who has served us well, and we all know I was not in favor of hiring an extra attorney last year with the budget. I was very wary of that. But I am hugely concerned about the legal ramifications if we are not physically in the building. If we are physically in the building, meeting the needs of our staff and students alike. Lawyers are very, very expensive, and outsigning, we took on Carol, or her position, as a special education legal expert because we wanted to reduce our costs from hiring outside firms. Our neighbor to the north, who I hate that we compare ourselves to, but we do ever so much, has a whole entire firm on retainer. That's very expensive. I think we need to think smartly and in the broader aspect of things. There's a lot of things that we don't know that are coming down the pike. And I think it would do us well to be as best prepared as we possibly can for that. I had advocated prior to this for another position at the Kelly building for the associate superintendent for high schools, because we continue to add high schools, and I still believe and do believe that that is a position that is needed. I am understanding if the rest of the board is not in favor of that, but I think as we continue to grow, when we talk about teachers being essential employees and treating them as such, they need support from all angles, not just financial support, but support from leadership, support in their jobs, support that they need someone else that they can come to. And I think that that's the design of the Kelly Leadership Buildings. I do want to remind everyone who is watching, because there seems to be this constant rhetoric that if we just get rid of Kelly Center positions or we don't continue to hire or fill those positions, that we can give additional funds to teachers. I have repeatedly said this, not because I'm not in favor of giving additional money. If we had all the money in the world, I would pay teachers as much as we possibly can, because I get to hear about this on the board, and I'm also related to a lot of teachers across the country. I can't emphasize that enough. I get it on every angle possible. I am a firm believer that they work miracles. It's even more been proven so. Now I'm trying to work as home as a parent and manage a first grader and classes for him and I'm in awe. However, there is not enough money if we add up those positions to even make a dent of any type of improvement in quality of financial lives for teachers. I know it's a tough decision to make, but I think if you're talking about supporting them, there's more than one way to support them. And I think it's always smart to have good people in management positions. You need good quality management in order to make everything flow. And I think that that's something that we should really consider as a board. And if there is a way that we can look at the budget quarterly or whatever that time frame is based upon the state relooking and the county relooking, I think as a board, we owe it to our staff and to the school division and to our community to do that. And I firmly believe that. I also want to suggest as we go down the pike, since we are talking about budgets, if it's a realistic option, if we do not go back into buildings, is there some kind of way, maybe if funds do increase or because we aren't utilizing the buildings in the same capacity, that we could then in turn free up some funds to maybe provide teachers with some stipends. Normally it's a function of PTA, for example, to reimburse teachers for classroom expenses. What if 6 months, 7 months, 2 months, I don't know the time frame because again, there's a lot we don't know. But if there's a way to take some of the money that we would normally be using in a building for building operating costs that we're not using to funnel that back to the teachers. I'm not saying that it's a possibility. I'm saying that that's something that's worth discussion as we know and we move closer to what the fall will look like. I think it's something we should consider down the road because I do think that in any way that we can support teachers, we should be looking at that. But I am cautious in adding additional funds, being that we don't know what our budget's going to look like. I know even as recently as this week, we expect a vote from Congress where they're going to designate some funds down to us locally, but we don't even know how much that'll be. Maybe it's $1 million, maybe it's $150,000. We don't know. So I'm just cautious and I just want to remind everyone that that is the largest portion of our budget and we spend the most amount of money on our staff and I think it's important to do so, but I would rather keep people on board and employed and operating than not. So that's where I run into my hesitancy. It has no way, shape or form and directions towards not appreciating or loving teachers because I very much do. They're certainly miracle workers during this time as well as all of their support staff. So that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Wallingford, can you address maybe some of the thoughts that Ms. Williams had on what kinds of fluid changes? So, for example, and maybe let me start this question with Dr. Waltz. Dr. Waltz, you had mentioned that in 2008 or 9 with President Obama's stimulus package, we received $40 million from the federal government for stimulus. This time we only received $9 million. We did talk about this briefly last week, but can you touch on what would happen, for example, if we got 20 million in this next stimulus package or 30 million? How do we spend that money then?
So my suggestion would be that we go back to the approved budget. So when you make your decisions on what you'd like to do, what you'd like to do at this point in time, if we were to get additional revenue because of additional funding from the feds or any improvement in sales tax or those kinds of things, then my recommendation, I would come back to you with the very same items that you had approved in the original budget and or any urgent things that might need to be done differently because of the status that we may be in terms of in-person attendance, distance learning, computer needs, technology, Wi-Fi, and so forth. And then I would present ideas of how we could build those back in. And then again, it would ultimately be the school board's decision on the action taken. It just so happened with that stimulus money, we happened to get it just before we were going to have to lay off at one point in time, almost 700 people.
That was back in 2009 or 8, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Great. Okay, I'm sorry. I took Ms. Zargarpur.
Good evening, everyone. I do have a few questions and comments. So in no particular order, I know there's some people who are going to joke about this. As a teacher myself, I work for a division that is freezing my pay and my COLA. So I am keenly aware of what that feels like. If we could find the money for COLA here, I would really like to see that added in. However, I'm also very realistic about and slightly concerned about our financial future. Not only do we have a reduction in sales tax, we also have about 20% unemployment right now, maybe nationwide, something like that, which means there's payroll taxes that aren't getting paid. And the lottery is not taking in as much money. So those three things are the things that help fund our schools. And so I'm very worried about that forecast. And so if we can't do COLA, if we defer it to when we can, that would be the next best option. I just don't know how that works within a division, but I just wanted to make sure that's definitely making sure our teachers are taken care of is a priority of mine, especially since what's the phrase we've all been saying? We've been building the plane while we fly it. Many of us did not already teach online, and we had to suddenly learn how to do that. And it's getting better, and our students are learning how to learn online, but I think we're probably going to end up revisiting online learning again in the fall, maybe, or certainly some point during the next school year. And it's a different kind of stress. I know it takes some of my friends a little bit longer to prepare lessons for online than it would if they just walked into their classroom. And these are seasoned teachers, so I'm a little worried about them. If we can help them out at some point, that's definitely a priority. Another one that I have, because I am in the Coles district, 2 of my schools are affected by by these cuts or these deferments. I shouldn't say cuts. Take that back. They're deferments. But specifically, the folks at Hilton have been asking questions about the turf field. I know I pushed a couple of their emails. I don't know if anyone got a chance to answer them. So if someone could maybe answer the question here. I know it's only 1.6 million. For Hilton, it means that they would be able to have not when it's a turf field, other people can use the field. The marching band can use it, PE classes can use it, and then the track team can actually host events there. And in absence of this field, they lose a little bit of these other things they could do, but it also costs them $40,000 to maintain the grass field. So that was a concern from people in the Coles district. And then the other thing I want to make sure, if we can, I feel like there's just been a lot of numbers and things. First of all, did we lose our special education TAs in this budget? And if we did, is there a way we can find to put some of them back? And then the last thing I wanted to ask about was just the way it was presented I'm looking at my thing here online. The $500,000 for the one-time consultant is crossed out. It's line 26 and it says move to the cloud. So I just noticed that. I'd like to know what that is. So I think that's it for right now.
Wallingford, I think the 3 questions I got, Ms. Zargarpur, were the Hilton field, the 500,000 from the consultant moved to the cloud, and was it TAs, teaching assistants you asked about, correct? Was there another question?
Those were the 3 I got as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
only if we get a windfall and we can get a COLA in there.
Oh yeah, sure. And then can a COLA be added later on? So if you can address those, Mr. Wallingford, that'd be great.
So first,
before he starts,
Sure.
I would just like to weigh in. Again, I just want to remind you that part of what the strategy was in the deferral of the cash-based projects was a strong concern, and I'll let Mr. Wallingford speak for himself, but a very strong concern that we may be in a position where we need more cash to offset expenses next year. And so we looked at the cash-based projects, and we decided or I made the ultimate decision to recommend continuing to build the security vestibules at Woodbridge and Grand Park Middle School, because that was a safety security issue that we've addressed in almost every other school. So we took all the other cash-based projects and we recommended deferring on those for the reason that I mentioned. But the other point to recall is that if you start funding some and not others, you're sort of pitting board members against each other and magisterial districts. So could you restore that? Yes, you can. But I just wanted to explain the thinking behind it. And then I would like John to add on, since he's responsible for, keeping track of the financial issues. Just, John, if you could just speak yourself in your own words, please.
Thank you, Dr. Waltz. We sent, I believe, yesterday to the board on 11 items, 11 points that were put together by staff because we're concerned that the economy is it's clearly doing badly. We're running at about 15% unemployment in the county and 15% nationwide. Those numbers continue to climb. They're new jobless claims every week. The lowest increase in jobless claims over the past 8 weeks has been 3.3 million, and we've lost nationally about 33 million jobs so far. So payroll taxes, sales taxes, lottery receipts, all of those are subject to substantial decreases. There are folks who think that those numbers may be in the range of 20 to 25%. There are nationally recognized economists who are saying gross domestic product, GDP, may be down as much as 28%. Those are clearly at the bad end of the scale. One of the numbers that I shared in that series of points was if we have to find ourselves reducing as much as 20% on sales tax and lottery receipts, that would require us to find about $16 to $17 million. Okay, that's not currently in the budget. Coincidentally, those cash-based projects add up to almost $17 million. So putting that money away would provide a kind of a security blanket, a reserve to cover us should the worst outcome come to pass. So to one or two other questions, TAs, we had about $2 million originally allocated for TAs. That was one of the items that has been suggested for deferral. The $500,000 that's on the list that was consultants and is lined through. The thought was that we needed to take a look at potentially upgrading our financial and HR systems. Because of the economic downturn, the cash won't be on hand to make that happen. So what we're going to do, should this budget pass, is we're going to move the current financial systems out to the cloud. We currently have 10-year-old computers that our systems are running on, and it's becoming risky. They're getting ready to go out of support. They're so old. So in consultation with the folks in IT, we've decided to move that out to the cloud. And so that $500,000, instead of paying for consultants to potentially upgrade the software, will help pay the costs of moving to the cloud with our financial systems. I think I covered all those questions, Dr. Lateef.
Okay, great. So just by my notations here, so maybe John, you can address Mr. Wilk's question. He said that by his calculations, TAs, and maybe Justin, you can weigh in on this, or Mr. Wilk, on 145,000. What is he talking about? What does that mean?
So in the original budget, we were planning on a step and 2% for all employees on scale. And for subs and TAs. We originally had them with a 2% increase. That number was increased to 4.8 to mirror the increases that folks on scale would see. And so that all we've done there is a reduction of the 2%, just like we did for scale, the change to the scale, the COLA. So they're in line, those folks are in line with the increase that people on scale would have.
What is 145,000? Is that the difference for the 2%?
The 145,000 was the additional amount to get them to 4.8. And that was added, if I recall correctly, that was added at markup.
Okay.
So another way of saying it that may help is there was a disparity between the kinds of raises that various employees were getting. What we have in this budget is every employee getting an average of 2.8%.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think at this point now, after we've heard from each person, I have a list of some items here that we could consider voting on as far as asking Dr. Waltz and his staff to consider fitting into this budget before it comes to us finally next Wednesday. So very similar to how we do in the other sessions, I guess the biggest item right now that we have to address is the COLA. Mr. Wilk has brought this up in emails to the board. He's asked about us addressing this. And let me weigh in a couple things before we go down this line, if everyone's okay with that. But you know, I would like to echo the concern by many of the board members on the uncertainty we face. You know, we are adding costs that we never thought we'd add. For example, buying PPE, which we need now and which we'll probably need in the fall. Mr. Wallingford, my one question is just thoughts on how much we're spending on PPE alone. Are you there?
Sorry, Dr. Lateef, I had to unmute.
Yeah, yeah, PPE costs.
Most recently, purchasing masks, we spent about, I think it was about $40,000. $40,000 on masks will go rapidly if we're, you know, depending on the situation. If we have students in buildings and employees in buildings and we have to give everybody masks, we could be spending hundreds and hundreds, millions of dollars, in fact, if we're providing masks to everybody. So the real answer to your question is it depends on whether there are people in the buildings, whether we're open in the, you know, in the fall. I can tell you that, and you probably know this as well, that you can get the surgical mask for anywhere between 50 cents and $1 a piece. And you can do a little quick math on that one, and it adds up very rapidly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And so you know, I share the concerns of Ms. Williams, Ms. Wall, and the board members on the uncertainty of the future. It is extremely disheartening. I would like to make it crystal clear, if folks are just joining us for the first time and weren't involved in the entire budget season, this entire board prioritized teacher pay. Teacher pay was put at 4.8% this year, which was a step increase and a cost of living increase on top of last year's 4.8%. And that was the highest priority that the school board gave in this current budget. And unfortunately, we didn't get the budget we wanted from the Board of County Supervisors. We fell short now with the state due to COVID-19. And so we can't do what we came in here wanting to do. I would like to reiterate to the public that I have spoken to each board member or traded emails with them and heard from them that they are sincere in their desire, as you've heard here earlier, on their desire to help catch up. It is why I think most of the school board members are supporting and asked Dr. Waltz in his revised budget that he presented last week to keep the step increase. In light of other counties not having them, some counties in the state may be moving to furloughs. I think this is a remarkable part of this budget moving forward, and I'm frankly excited by it. I think it gives us a chance to catch up. I know it's not where we had hoped to be, and I struggle with the disappointment of this budget daily. I can share with you in discussions with Chair Wheeler on the Board of County Supervisors, she, a real champion for our schools and education, really wanted to do this as well. And so I think, I'm looking forward to what we can do moving forward in the future as the economy improves. But I'd like to go down the list if no objections from the board members, and we can start with, I guess I'd ask Mr. Wilk, what would you like, Mr. Wilk? Would you like an up and down vote on certain items that you had requested? What would you like?
I guess that would be the quick way to go. Or, we could ask to see, we could give the superintendent and his team the ability between now and then to show us what a budget would look like to somehow fit in partial COLA or something. We can go through and do the up and down votes. I don't know. I'll reserve that to you.
Okay. I think one thought, remind me if I'm wrong, maybe someone knows, the reason we wanted to give the TAs a little bit extra was because they were further behind than everyone else. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a feeling if it's $145,000 to still get them up a little higher, because we are trying to catch them up. I know there's a feeling from board members as I've talked to them that is something that folks are may be interested in doing. Does anyone have any strong opposition to trying to fit that in?
No.
Mr. Chairman, I support it.
Okay. Ms. Williams?
I don't have any strong opposition to that, no.
Okay. In light of it being 145,000, Mr. Wallingford, and I know, Dr. Waltz, you pointed out that you're trying to keep it even with everyone else, but I know there's been a lot of discussion from the school board members about this particular item, and I know it was a robust discussion in the original work session to keep it, and I know Mr. Wilk would like to keep it. Is there a way we can look in this week before you present the final budget, finding some funds to do that?
So we would need to know what the board would like to cut in order to come up with 145,000.
I have a suggestion.
Sure, yeah.
Has there been any discussion? I'm looking at a couple of things here of maybe eliminating next year the armored car service that goes to schools 3 times a week, $255,000.
That's for the bookkeeper money.
No, people should drive safer.
So let's try to keep this orderly a little bit, because it's just hard for me to see everyone. Mr. Wallingford, can you address the armored car issue? And is there any way that there can be savings found on the armored car issue?
So we could certainly, if it's the board's desire to cut that, we could certainly do that. But here's what I'd say. We put the armored car service in place, it's probably 2 years ago or 3 years ago. One of the big pushes for that, one of the big benefits that we received from that is that we have security for those folks who are going to the bank sometimes, once or twice a day sometimes, but certainly several times a week. There is about $250,000 there. We could do that. It would create some operational issues that we'd have to address.
Let me, if I may, just add in there, at a time when we have many branch banks closing, there are many branch banks that are now consolidating. And we would then also absorb the health risk, if we're still in this COVID situation, of putting our own employees, mixing them with the general public on those deposits. So I guess I would ask this. If you come up, so the 145,000, basically what that would do would be, it would be taking the teaching assistants that were affected. Now, remember, you have other employees on that same step. So you'd be taking only the teaching assistants and giving them, instead of the 2.8% raise, you'd be giving them a 4.8% increase. So certainly if that's what the board decides to do, we can do that. In terms of finding the money, if there's one or two things like that and something else that the board decides they want to do, we can go back and take a look and see what we can find before next week. If there's going to be what at one point looked like a whole bunch of additions again, then I think we should do the cuts tonight. Again, if the board as a total is only going to put forth a couple of increases that are modest in the big scheme of things, we could do that.
Okay, so we've discussed that. So let's put that to the side as something that the board is interested in doing. There was no strong opposition to that. And so according to your sort of discussion, let's move on and see what kind of list we develop here. The second thing that I heard a lot of folks talk about was the, let's do the big one, the elephant in the room, the COLA. I think, if you're going to add the COLA, that's going to require enormous amounts of cuts. And I think we should, my opinion on the COLA is that I don't think we can find the money for the COLA this year. And I am, as I stated earlier, extremely supportive of the step increase, which we worked very hard to get in the last couple of weeks. And so, I'm happy to hear if there's if you want to do an up and down vote to make it efficient, we could do that. Or certainly if there's a strong support for the COLA, I'm willing to, if you can find the cuts. Mr. Wilk or Ms. Zargapur.
So the COLA was 10 million, right?
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Wilk.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Zargapur.
Well, here's a question. We have a thing that says to defer 29 of 58 buses. Can we defer some more buses? Is that a place to pull a little more out of?
We're expecting over 900 new students next year. I would probably not even. I don't know if that's worth the discussion, but
I'm trying.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Mr. Wilk.
Can someone in central office from the superintendent staff explain, given the reality of what we're facing with, why an additional, this is not like the site-based funding for textbooks, but why allocated $3.1 million there for textbooks? I find it interesting. Kids aren't going home with textbooks right now for virtual learning. I know most textbooks do come with electronic copies, and I understand from previous questions, it's the same price. So you have to buy, unfortunately, it's kind of sad that you have to buy like the textbook with the tree cut down to get the electronic copy. But is there any way to scale back that and find some additional money in there for the $3.1 million in new textbook expenditures just for next year to help offset, to try to find some funds to do some type of partial COLA? It may not be the full 10 million needed for it, but some type of cost of living allocation. I don't know. I'm looking at that. I'm also looking at, furniture expenditures, new furniture, $2.2 million next year. Is that, again, and something else we could defer for a year and use that money to pay, again, to fill an area for this? I don't know. I just, looking at the existing expenditures and what we pay every year, I know we keep on talking, and you brought up a good point, Dr. Waltz, about the armed services, the trucker, about exposing people to possibility of more COVID and stuff like that. So we look at that side of it. I mean, if we look at possibly, since kids may not be going to school, we may not need to turn over the new furniture right away or something like that. Is there possibility, again, looking at, I'll push Dr. Lateef, I guess, for an up or down vote. I'm just trying to give something workable to see if it's possible before, I think it'll just all be voted down. So Justin, I think your points are well taken. The problem with the recommendations in we've talked about this in the work session on and I'll let Dr. Waltz and Wallingford answer this, but the textbook money and what was the other thing you said? The furniture. Those are one-time costs. And so when you're doing a COLA, it's a baseline adjustment that we're going to have to fund every year moving forward. And so, one of the concerns is to do that. And I got my hat handed to me.
in the work session on trying to remove things like digital equity in the turf fields at certain schools where those are one-time costs. And they don't really address what I wanted at the time was the economic disadvantage funding, which is ongoing expenses, right? So we got to find ongoing revenues to replace what you're asking. But I'll leave Dr. Waltz, Mr. Wallingford, Dr. Waltz, if you want to address that.
I have just a couple of comments. One, we'll have Ms. Goss respond to the textbook issue. And if need be, we can have other staff weigh in on that. On the furniture, what we did do is we made a reduction, and Mr. Wallingford, after Rita Goss, if you could please weigh in.
Sure.
We'll have Mr. Wallingford weigh in on the furniture, but we did cut the 2% increase that would be affect furniture. But if you recall last spring, we had a number of students and teachers. I remember in particular, multiple staff and students from Stonewall Jackson High School talk about the furniture. And we had just started to rebuild the old furniture that we have in some of our oldest buildings. So again, can we do these things? If there are 5 board members that want to do whatever you would like to do, we will certainly do that. Rita Goss, please. Associate Superintendent, would you please speak to the textbook?
Yes, good evening. Textbooks, it's important to remember that we have a textbook adoption for English language arts coming up in this coming school year, in the 2021 school year. And so we will need funding to complete that textbook adoption. It's also important to remember that as we move to Canvas, our new learning management system, that we will want to maintain licenses for our textbooks, especially the online licenses for those textbooks, in order to migrate and use those materials as a part of that learning process that's for distance learning. So there are a number of pieces to consider when you're looking at textbooks. It's also important to remember, like at the elementary level, a lot of textbooks are consumables, as some of you know, who have worked in elementary schools. And so those consumables are costs that are ongoing. So it's not a one-time purchase for those textbooks. So that gives you a little bit of background about overall. You know, I would say that we also will be planning for another textbook adoption the following year, which is science. And so we're always trying to plan ahead for textbooks to make sure that we are purchasing them so we have them in time to use for instruction. And it's important to remember that those textbooks and those licenses that we purchase, even to access those online materials, you purchase a license that has to be repurchased every so often, and it depends on the textbook adoption as to how many years in which we have to re-up that license.
Can I respond? Thank you. Can I respond to that?
Sure, Mr. Wu.
Thank you, Ms. Goss. I appreciate that. So this is my frustration. Again, all that sounds wonderful. It makes rationale, makes sense. What frustrates me as a board member is if I look at that big lump sum of $3.1 million, some of those things you talked about seem more higher on the priority scale than maybe some others, in my opinion, like the elementary ones and stuff like that. Like, I get it. It's just kind of like I was telling Mr. Wallingford, is when you have like $4.9 million from miscellaneous projects and facilities, as a board member, I'm trying to wonder, what is that type of stuff? What does that mean itemized? Because it sounds like a very big number. And if we're talking again, like Dr. Walt said, if we have 5 board members who believe that this is a priority versus refreshing and continuing the textbook adoption, then that is fine. But my frustration with this is I don't know how much is being allocated for what in these kind of bundles, like you said, of all these great reasons of renewals and refreshing and also paying for subscriptions and online stuff. That would be really helpful for me, because when you see something like this, it's like textbook adoption. What does that actually entail? What does that mean? And why is this, a process, Ms. Goss, how often, again, what's the refresh for each subject, please?
The refresh really depends on the cycle in which the state is on. We follow the state cycle on textbook adoption. And so this coming year will be English language arts. And we've already started that process to look at that adoption. And the refresh actually depends on the master agreement. So certainly finance can maybe speak a little bit more to that. But when we do a master agreement for a textbook purchase, that's a part of the agreement that we negotiate with the textbook company when we do that purchase. And it provides for that renewal period, as you will. Sometimes those consumable materials are purchased and they provide them to us for a certain number of years. And the same with the online licenses.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Lateef?
Up
Ms.
another,
Jessie.
I'm sorry.
Dr. Lateef?
Yes, Ms. Jessie.
I just wanted to comment on one-time expenditure versus ongoing monies needed for personnel. And when you look at the textbook situation, when the armored car, I really, I wanted to talk about that because as a principal, for the bookkeepers, you can't have money in the building. At the end of the day, you've got to get that money out of that building. And so years ago, for me, these bookkeepers were carrying this money in their cars to the bank. And I think that we really do need to really look at that. For teacher assistants, I think that we need to really look at that also because we're going to have some real serious unemployment issues for many of these teachers and the teacher assistants. And I think that anything that we could do for our teaching staff, I think Justin said that maybe not to take a vote, but to look at for Dr. Waltz and Mr. Wallinger to look at if there's some way we can perhaps partial and also for the teacher assistants on the buses. Again, you have to go back to this COVID thing. I'm not sure we're going to be on the same schedule. We may have 2 or 3 bus loads of kids coming in. We may have kids going part of the day. I think we need to be careful about getting rid of buses because I think we may need them because we may need more bus drivers than we may need. It's just that we're really not just the money, but we're going into an unknown. And I think we would be wise to have money set aside and be aware of busing needs, personnel needs, people becoming ill and having to be replaced, substitute money. I think you're going to need subs. So I think personnel to me is key and trying to, as much as we can, to support our personnel that are out there. And also food services, which is not something that we've thought about, but that's another area. So I just wanted to put a point in for long-term ongoing expenses instead of the short-term. Thank you.
Sure,
So-
Dr. Waltz.
Thank you. So you had one other area of money, which I'm not quite sure, but I'd like either Mr. Wallingford or if you want Mr. Shiroki to weigh in also, but we don't just have a pot of money for $4.9 million of miscellaneous projects. Can you better explain that, Mr. Wallingford, or if you need additional folks to help you, please?
No, I think I can take care of that question. The $4 million that Mr. Wilk refers to really is an accounting issue. And there's a long history to it, and I can explain that if you'd like. But simply stated, what's going on there is we budget some of our major maintenance and renovation projects in Department 046. 046 is facility services. Okay. Several years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago, instead of managing those projects in that department, we started transferring that money into the capital projects fund. So what's taking place there is, if you take a look at the budget book, the proposed budget book, what you'll see is the 3 prior years actuals, the actual expenditures in that account were very low, 200,000, 150, that kind of number. And then for fiscal 20 and fiscal 21, the number you see there is about $4.5 million. The transaction that's taking place is we're moving that budget authority out of those accounts. We're moving them into a central account called fixed charges, and that is the account from which we do the transfer. So those funds, what you see in the proposed budget book appears to be a dramatic increase starting the current fiscal year, fiscal 20, when in fact, what's happening there is the budget authority is being moved and those funds are being expended in Fund 7. So there isn't a large pot of money there. It's just where it's originally budgeted. I hope that helps explain.
Okay. Mr. Wilk? You have anything further?
Dr. Lateef?
Yes, Mr. Wallingford.
I'd like to make one point about textbook funds as well. One of the things that I take a look at on a annual basis when we do our budgets is whether or not we're providing funding, the same funding level that we get from the state for textbooks. We're always very close on that number. One of the things that we need to continue to do, and we'd have to look at it again if that was an area of interest, we'd have to take a look at that and make sure that the funding we're providing to schools doesn't fall under the levels that the state is providing to us. So that's not an answer I have off the top of my head. We'd have to take a look at that item.
Okay. So let me, Mr. Wilk, do you have anything further to ask?
No, I think that Mr. Wallingford, did you also explain, you did in the email, but maybe for clarity for the community, the line 3999, other contracted services, of the different types of contracts and the categories of all that, or what determines as other contracted services?
Yes, sir, Mr. Wilk. 3999 is an object code, one of our accounting attributes, one of our budgetary codes that identifies other contractual services. Okay, the 3000 series, and that is 3001 through 3999. We have a variety of object codes for all kinds of services. For example, phone services. I could go on and list a variety of object codes for different kinds of contractual services. 399 is a code that's used to identify contractual services that are not specifically identified in one of those other 3000 series object codes. If you take a look across the whole division, most budgets at schools and central offices, with just a handful of exceptions, there are very small amounts in the object code 3999, other contractual services. A majority of our flex funds across the school division are in those 3000 series and 4000 series object codes. So when you take a look at the 3000 series in isolation, you see large numbers there, but that's because that's where most of our flex funds are expended.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think, so let me just, I'll run through each person because I can't remember if I've gone through everyone, if they have anything further. Well, let me address the other items that I'm sorry, that were commonly mentioned or found in common. Was the attorney. I know there's concern by a number of members on the board to keep the added attorney in the budget for legal counsel, and then the high school associate superintendent position I know was something that people wanted. So I recognize that most of the, actually all the positions at the Kelly building were eliminated. I'd like to remind everyone that the county board of supervisors, I think, has 8 times the number of attorneys we currently do working over there in some fashion or form, and we don't. So, you know, the argument that we're somehow top heavy in certain areas, I find it remarkable, but that's for a discussion later on. so there's a consideration for an attorney and associate superintendent for high schools. So I think I don't currently, let's finish with the COLA. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to the COLA as far as advocating for the COLA at this time?
I would like to advocate for the COLA, and I know that the Board of Supervisors perhaps has more attorneys and they've got more central, but I do not think that as a board, we should not, what I'm saying is that I think it would be a slap in the face to teachers if we added those positions. I think are almost $1 million. I'm not sure. The salary for the attorney and for associate superintendent and associate superintendent secretaries. I think that to me, I'm not saying that it's not needed, but I think during this budget crisis, it's something that maybe we could look at down the road. But to not give teachers their COLA and for us to add at central, I think is, in my mind, it's just my mind. I don't think that's a good idea.
Okay, Ms. Jackson.
Having just left the classroom in just June and also had taught during the last, like the Great Recession, and I worked in 3 different counties, Baton Rouge, Fairfax, and Prince William County. I know firsthand the impact that this had on my wallet. I was, by myself, owned a house. And so I think, we shouldn't take not giving COLA lightly, or we should review it, like make sure that go through all the current positions that are being added, and then, make sure, I ask the staff to make sure that if they're really, to look through them and really essential. But $10 million, I know is a lot to ask, and it does set a precedent. So I'm, something I'm looking at from all angles.
Chairman,
yes, Dr. Waltz.
I would just like to, just to make sure everybody understands that in the recommended reductions, I took out both the attorney, the associates, and their respective assistants. So again, it has nothing to do with whether we need them or not, but just for the record, I want to make sure that everybody understands that that was on the reduction list.
Absolutely, Dr. Waltz. Thank you. The reduction list was extensive, unfortunately.
Dr. Lateef.
Mr. Wallingford.
Yeah, just one quick point. I want to make sure that we understand, because I keep hearing the number 10 million. The COLA is actually closer to 11 million. It's 10.9.
Okay.
Just for clarity.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Ms. Williams.
I'm ready to, if we're going to do a roll call up or down, and I think again, I just want to remind the board members that the COLA is not just a one-time expense. It's going to continue, and to I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do that.
I'm sorry, Derek, can I make the motion then to see? It doesn't seem like I have the votes for a 2%, or can we go for a 1% COLA?
Why don't we, okay, let's vote for a 1% COLA, which is 5.45 million, right?
From moving forward from this year on.
Yeah, so that's right. So Mr. Wilk is asking that we vote up or down on a 1% COLA. So I will start with, I will start first on this, and I'll take my role. We'll do the vote. So I vote no on this, and I will ask next Ms. Zargapur.
This is, oh gosh, because it adds 5 million moving forward, and we don't know what we're walking into. And is this something we could vote on and then look at our what's coming in and say, okay, we're going to have to just defer this until we can do it?
That's what we already started with, was deferring the COLA.
Sure. I mean, look, I mean, I think if we get 50 million from the feds, I think that's something we could absolutely consider doing. I mean, that is something that I think we have to look at quarterly. And that was our highest priority, right? That was among our highest priorities for the board. So I think, as Dr. Waltz very eloquently mentioned earlier, that, you know, they put a budget together, it was very nice. And then, you know, the cuts we made still retain the spirit of what our priorities were. They just weren't as robust as we wanted them to be.
Can you amend his motion to say that we would look at future funding?
I think Dr.
Sure.
Waltz
I
already
think
mentioned.
that's a standing, I think everyone on the board agrees that that's a standing sort of agreement. We all are happy with looking and changing whatever we can if more money's become available. And I think Dr. Waltz also mentioned that already.
He specifically said that if we have additional funds, we go back to the projects that were deferred or we put in the original budget.
So I
call it priority.
So let me have Ms. Zargarpur finish, please.
Correct.
Yeah, I think in the context of this financial situation, it makes more sense to wait and know that we have it. Because what I am actually more afraid of is saying, hey, you can have it, and then we have to take it back. And that would be worse, in my opinion. So this is me, yeah, just wait. I'd rather know we have the money for sure. Rather than, yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Zargarpur. So, and Ms. Jessie, Dr. Waltz pointed out that if they did come up with money, he would come to the board and ask us, you know, at that time, say we get stimulus money, how should we spend it? And we will always weigh in on that. And that'll be the time you make the priorities.
Yeah, okay, so as long as it's going to be.
We revisit our priorities, sure.
And, okay.
So we'll go next to Ms. Williams.
I just want to reiterate again that it was mentioned that this is something we'd have to continue to fund years on out, that funding teachers in any way, shape, or form possible is the highest priority of the board. That will be revisited, and I think the entire board agreed upon that, as well as Dr. Waltz said that. So at this time, I can't support a COLA if it could mean anything from us having to lay off people in the future to other projects or something else. I maintain the position that should we have additional funds come in, that we go back to our original budget and give what we can give when we know we have it. But I'm uncomfortable spending $5 million right now, knowing that it's going to cost more things out of our budget than we have redlined now or deferred, and projects that may never happen that will move from deferment to not at all. So I'm not comfortable with that. But as soon as we do have funds to allow, I am absolutely in favor.
Okay, so right now that'll be a no. And then Mr. Wilk?
Yes.
Ms. Wall?
So I echo the concerns that have been expressed about our budget situation. I think the prudent thing to do is to not extend a COLA and to wait and see what our funds are looking like. I think at this time, we need to be as careful and cautious as possible with our finances. So I would not be in support of that.
Ms. Ralston?
I need to ask a question. Last year, did we have the COLA sitting there?
Yes,
And did
ma'am.
we
We did
fund it?
2.8% step increase and a COLA last year.
That's right. Okay, then the answer is no.
Ms. Jessie?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
It's like what Lisa said, and Lori, Ms. Williams, what Ms. Zagapur, Ms. Wall, Ms. Williams all said. It's a hard choice, but I'm just really concerned about whether or not we'll have the funds. So it would be a sad no.
Okay, so that the COLA does not pass and there's no majority vote for the COLA at this time. I think to reiterate, the 2.8% step is something that you know, I'm excited that we're even able to give in the midst of this crisis, and I think you know, the board is. I'm grateful to the board for even considering that over the course of this year. And again, I want to remind everybody, this board made it, you know, a high priority when we decided to put the original budget together, when things were looking much better than they were. So next, I think the only two residual items I guess I have here is the attorney and the associate superintendent. One thing we could think about, Ms. Williams, since you had brought this up, that we may want to come up with a priority list of those positions we'd like to bring back as money becomes available. So maybe we can sort of order those. Is that a thought that you would consider?
I'm in favor of that. The only reason I did not expect to receive a whole lot of support at the associate superintendent for high school level. That was still sort of contentious at our original work session. I just believe that that's something that we need to consider and we should do as well. I still am in favor of the middle school because we continue to grow. I don't necessarily know because again, I'm not an expert at that in that category that it needs to be immediate. I was thinking more from an HR perspective and the timeline that it takes to hire, implement, bring someone on board, that kind of a thing, more than any other. That was my frame of mind for that. I'm willing to add that to a priority list. I do think that it is still imperative for us to really think hard and long about adding another attorney because attorney's fees are extremely expensive. The law is constantly changing. And we have two lawyers, one who does special education and one who handles everything else. And that's pretty much taking away from everything that they're kind of like joined at the hip right now doing everything instead of being able to just dedicate their time to whatever their specialization is. And I'm really concerned. I mean, we just saw, I think this week or last week, Title IX changes. There'll be more to come. We have a very interesting Secretary of Education, just a special education. And I'm not a lawyer, but that happens to be a subject that's near and dear to my heart. The changes that have come through from March have been incredible, and they will continue to be incredible. I just think it's cheaper to have somebody on staff than to have to retain a firm or to get sued. So, if there isn't support for that at this time, it's understandable. I just think that I'm trying to think future forward because we don't know what's coming down the pike. And I don't know. I just happen to be a fan of having somebody here instead of retaining somebody later, being that there's a lot of unknowns. But I'm open to what the rest of the board members think. If no one's in agreement, would like to defer or think that's a better path, I'm open.
So based on what I'm hearing, we just have the TAs that everyone seems to be interested in. Dr. Walt said if that list was relatively small, they'd be able to work some stuff out. Would you guys like to let's do a vote. I think Miss Williams is deferring on the associate superintendent for high school, but she makes an argument for the attorney. I think in light of COVID-19 and the number of regulations and things that we're going to have to oversee and comply with may become more challenging and difficult. I do, and I've always favored this position. But I think, Ms. Williams, would you like an up-down vote on that attorney?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm going to start first again, and I'm going to say yes on the attorney. And also remember that if we do dedicate the money for the attorney, there's time taken for a search. There's time taken to hire someone. It may not happen in September or June or July. It may happen in January or February next year. So the entire amount of money doesn't get spent that way. It becomes what we call slippage. And put back in the pot for other things. So I went, yes, we'll go to Ms. Argapur.
Yes, sorry.
Yes.
My
Yes,
microphone.
Ms. Argapur. Okay, Miss Williams, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Wilk
No.
and Miss Ralston
Yes.
and Miss Jessie,
No.
Miss Jackson,
Yes.
and Miss Wall. Sorry, I missed you there.
I would say, while I see the need for an attorney in our division, I would say no at this time, because I feel like, going back to my original argument, I think right now we need to focus on what is absolutely going to keep us afloat. So I put this really high on my list of my wish list. We really probably at the top, but I would say no right now.
Okay, so that looks like it passed at 5-3. And based on sort of all our discussions, it looks like the board is interested in raising the TA salaries, Dr. Waltz, and finding money for hiring another attorney based on our work this evening.
Dr. Latif,
Yes.
can I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
With the TAs, are we looking to raise them to the 2.8% that everybody else is, or are we doing a 4.8%? Or what were we talking about exactly as far as like?
Yeah, so that's right. So they're going up at 2.8. What Mr. Wilk and Miss Jackson had mentioned was that they were far behind before. So there was a discussion in the work session. Please correct me if I'm wrong as I go through this, that they would really like them to be further ahead, so that we would give them another 2%.
Oh, I see. Okay, so parity across so they're more.
And I don't think we had parity even in the work session, Dr. Waltz, correct? We were giving them more than 4.8 anyways. Was that right? Was that part of the work session budget, or am I wrong?
No, I think what you're thinking of is we were converting certain non-contracted TAs to full-time contracted with benefits.
So Mr. Wallingford mentioned earlier that the 2.8% we're giving them now, but that it would only cost $145,000 to give those few TAs a little bit extra to catch them up from where they were. Am I wrong on that? Am I saying this wrong?
Mr. Wallingford, if you could clarify.
You're precisely correct, Dr. Latif.
Okay, I have a question. Dr. Latif?
Yes, Ms. Jessie.
Mr. Wallingford, because tonight we've said if we add something, we are going to have to find some way to pay for that. How much is it going to cost for the attorney?
The attorney is, am I muted? Yes, I'm sorry. The attorney and the clerical support that would go with that would cost just shy of $350,000.
So when you come back, you're going to tell us what you're going to cut? You're going to cut $350,000 for the attorney?
Well, I believe that's what the board is telling us to do.
Okay, well, I want to know what those cuts are going to be, because you're talking about $145,000 for teacher aides, but we're going to spend $350,000 for two individuals. So I really I'm very concerned, the kind of, and I just have a real concern with that. I know it was a 5-3 vote, but I think that we really need to think about if we can't give teacher aides for $145, but we can hire two people for $350,000. I don't know if that's, I know when we do our budgets as principals, we had a set amount. Why is it $250 is the cheapest that we can, as it for an attorney? The type of attorney we're looking for, is that it? Why is it $250?
I think it's a standard rate for a quality attorney, like they're going pay rate. I mean, I'm happy to make some suggestions.
I don't think so, but I like
So, to sort of be efficient about this, I think Ms. Jessie brings up a good point. I think these are the only two recommendations the boards has sort of voted on as far as changes in the superintendent's proposed modified budget. I think next week we'll vote on the final budget. We could, if Dr. Waltz and Mr. Wallingford can find the money to do this and let us know where the cuts are, we can sort of finalize this next week. If the cuts are not acceptable to the board, as we vote on it, then we will go back to the proposed budget and not do the attorney or the raise, or do one or the other. I think that's reasonable. If they can find the money and preserve the spirit of the entire budget, I think that's something the board will eventually vote on. And I want to thank all of you, because if this is the only two things we've sort of drilled this down to, I mean, one thing is sad because we had such a great budget. It's just brutal to see this come down. But but I think you guys have worked very hard on this over the course of this week, and I really appreciate it.
Could we ask Mr. Wallingford just to clarify exactly what the board is asking us to do? And is it for all teaching assistants, Mr. Wallingford? Or my printed copy of the revised list is like microscopic. So I just want to clarify what it is they're asking us to do, what that 145,000 covers.
That $145,000 covers an additional 2% increase for all substitutes and temporary employees, to be very precise.
We need precision. Thank you.
So, if I could, one additional comment to Mrs. Jessie's point, the attorney at $243,000, that's not salary, that's salary plus benefits. And our fringe burden is about just shy of 40%. So that's not salary, that's salary and benefits.
It's still a lot, sir.
Well, I have some ideas. I'll email them to you, Mr. Wallingford.
Very good.
Well, I hope, thank you. But I think that this is a disservice to teachers and teacher assistants. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, let me run through for final comments and clarifications. Let me first start with get my list here so I don't miss anybody. Ms. Jackson, we'll start with you. Any final thoughts or concerns, questions, comments?
I'd like to go through the list of the new positions and just evaluate their need, cost versus benefit, like, hiring an attorney now versus hiring one on retainer. To me, one seems to cost versus benefit. The other thing is we had mentioned about rehiring the TAs, and we didn't come back to that. I am concerned that they're currently working, the TAs, they were, without benefits or hired as temporary employees. So I'd like to at least come back to, I know it's $2 million, but I am concerned, about the missing TA positions. And then I'll send more questions to Mr. Wallingford over the week. And that I would really appreciate that they would post all of this so the public could review it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Ms. Jessie?
The other item I'd like for us to just think about is, as we look at this pandemic, that we need to think that down the road that we may need staff for summer, and we may need staff for weekends, and we may need staff for night learning. And I think when we put all of our eggs in terms of our salary, when we look at monies, we need to anticipate things that we have never had to anticipate. Because I don't think we know, and I don't think we should not plan ahead in some way and start thinking about the type of staffing, the type of busing. All of this thing could be very, very different as we approach the school year. I'm not sure we're going to even be able to open. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Jessie, thank you. We'll go to Ms. Ralston.
Just skip over me.
Thank you, Ms. Ralston. Ms. Wall?
I had just a couple of general comments. I had a few on this this printout that we received. Some of the things are in green and they're not listed as deferred. So I was wondering, and I don't know if this is the right time to do this, but I wondered if some of these things are still in the budget. And I know some of them are the deferrals of cash-based projects, which I suppose for a point of order, have we already decided that these will be deferred, or do we need to go through and say that they need to be deferred? Because my understanding was that we did need to say that they would be deferred, such as the turf field at Brunsville, the turf field at Hilton, the thing at Garfield, et cetera. Anyway, I have one point that we could, if we do $145,000 for TAs, we have one-time destination dance that appears to still be in here. And at least it doesn't look like it's deferred, and that's $185,000. So that's one thing that we can make a direct substitute. I mean, it's actually, 185, 145 TAs destination dance. Anyway, just looking at this information, I guess I probably sent some questions in clarifying what is deferred and what is still in the budget. Because as I'm looking at it, we do have some things in here that we probably could cut, or at least I could suggest that we cut. Anyway, those are my comments.
Okay, great. I mean, I think we will also finalize this next week. So I think they can work on this week, and we can bring this back up at that point. Mr. Wilk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a whole lot more to say. I do appreciate the way you allowed the discussion to carry and look at options and ideas for possibly paying for partial funding of the COLA. My thoughts were, I believe if it's a prioritized issue, I'd want to move forward now. I do appreciate that everyone seems to think if we do get a large allowance or stimulus from the federal government, that this would be a top priority. I'm always just looking at ways and looking at existing funds, and I still want to hone in and look at more about those textbooks and the furniture and things like that. But as Dr. Wells said, he would do anything we want to do. We just have to have 5 votes. And I did not have that support tonight. I respect everyone's opinions on that. And I'm happy we were able to work this out relatively in a very diplomatic, passionate, fun manner. There we go.
Fun.
Fun. Yeah, they don't usually call our meetings fun. But Miss Williams, when she smiles, I feel the fun. Let's go to Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo the sentiments of my colleagues here with the fact that I do appreciate that we were able to have this discussion. We were able to hear from everyone. I absolutely appreciate that everyone is giving the utmost care and concern for our budgetary needs, for our staff as being deeply thought of. I am very appreciative of the fact that we will be able to give everyone across the board a 2.8% increase, I believe it is. I think that is huge because, as has been mentioned before, there are so many jurisdictions where they're not able to do that at all. I know some other places in the state are concerned about whether they'll be able to retain employees. I do agree with Ms. Jessie's statements that, we definitely need to start thinking more about what the future may look like from a multitude of directions, because we may not be having traditional school. I actually kind of believe personally that that's highly unlikely. I think it'll be some sort of new revamped version, which I think we'll all be challenged, but I think it like Ms. Wall says, it's better to err on the side of caution when it comes to funding. I am supportive of any way, shape, or form we can give our teachers more money, but I don't want to do it at the expense of the entire division and end up in a worse situation than some of our counterparts in the state. I am also extremely pleased at the board's willingness to come back and review the budget as we need to, as the state brings us money or takes money away, as the county does the same. I think that's really important and a momentous step for this board. Usually under normal circumstances, we're sort of a one and done with the budget. And as things need to be moved around, we just kind of go, okay, let's move it for our operational, whatever funds we have. So just the fact that we're in complete agreement with that, I think is a outstanding measure. I think that speaks volumes to the care and concern that we do have for our school division and all of our staff. And I very much appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, even with the things that I suggest this evening, I'll be sending some things that I'm concerned about moving forward for Mr. Wellington to review. And I think to further address what our next steps are, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it is, when we come back next week to really finish looking at the budget with a fine-tooth comb, making those votes and determinations. And I think we owe it to each other to have a lot of conversation in the meantime, and to be alert to what may be coming down the pike from all areas, and to be really cognizant of that as we plan to move for the future. But again, I'm just overjoyed with the commitment by this entire board to continue to review this as needed. I think that's the smartest move that we can make, not knowing what we don't know. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Dr. Lateef, can I say one thing real quick?
Sure, Mr. Wilk.
Yeah, I just want to add a thank you to the superintendent and Mr. Wallingford and his staff to turn over our responses and our questions in a crazy timely manner. I didn't get mine off until like yesterday, and Mr. Wallingford called me immediately. And so I do want to appreciate and recognize the work that the central office team did in turning over our responses and getting those back to us in a very timely manner. So I just want to put that in there.
Very, very nicely said, Mr. Wilk. I don't need to say that. I think the entire board can and will shake their head and echo that sentiment. And I think we really appreciate all the great work that they're doing. And again, this is all being done from folks sitting at home, not having, access to things that they normally have. And I can't thank you all enough, Dr. Waltz, Mr. Wallingford, Ms. Goss, all the folks that were here tonight supporting our efforts. Again, as with every sort of session, if you have any further questions, concerns, comments, please get them to Dr. Waltz, Mr. Wallingford. Next Wednesday night, we will vote to finalize and adopt the budget for our year. I think with that,
just we never made the final decision on the cash projects.
All right, hold on. Let me go first with Dr. Waltz.
The board did not give its final decision on deferring of cash-based projects.
Oh, my apologies. I thought that was, and I guess Ms. Wall brought that up. Isn't that going to be part of the, I guess, do we have to vote on that tonight? I thought that was part of your proposed budget that we're going to vote on as a whole. Isn't that part of it, that you've deferred them all, or do we have to vote on it?
I've deferred them all unless the board is putting any back. I just want to be clear so that we have a budget that's correct next week.
Sure. I didn't hear of anyone wanting to put anything back. I know Ms. Zargapur brought the point up about Hilton, but I think it's, in my mind, I've come to the conclusion, I think the board did as well last week, that, your decision to defer all of them and not sort of have one compete versus the other is the right thing to do. I don't know if you want to go, do you want to have should we have an up-down vote on this, folks? To be clear to the superintendent, or everyone, any opposition to deferring the projects as a whole? Okay. I mean, that will preserve our cash situation and keep us in a much stronger position. Obviously, when things change, we will then vote on those projects. Is that correct? Is that good, Dr. Waltz?
Yes,
is that what you needed?
Very much.
Okay. Then I didn't know who else was talking. Ms. Williams, I know, wanted to say something.
I think.
No, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to remind you of the letter Z for Ms. Zagapur, because we keep forgetting.
Did I? Oh my God. My apology. Ms. Zagapur, I'm so sorry.
It's all good. It's been a long day. All right. So first I asked about Hilton because I had people writing to me. I had several emails about that. So I just wanted them to know, if they're watching, the whole answer, because it is a board decision as well. And the thing about the lawyer is, to me, it just seems important because of the times we're in now and the work that's already put on Carol Marchand. She probably could use another person. And there's some things that'll probably come up because of COVID. That's where my head is thinking there. We didn't really talk about the special education TAs. I felt like that got kind of mixed in with other TA issues. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be all of them, but I feel like that's an important piece for continuity of learning, especially for our special education students, especially in a time where this distance learning is going to be different for a lot of, everybody, but especially for some of our students. Or I feel like we didn't talk about it, but otherwise, these are all very, very hard decisions. It was so much easier pre-COVID just a couple months ago. And it is very hard to sit here and hack at things that are important. And I want to sleep at night, and it's still going to be hard. So, but that was my 2 cents.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you to the board. I will now, without any objection, ask that we adjourn, and we will meet back here in 1 week. Thank you all very much, and have a wonderful evening.